Mr. Chair, I think you have a quorum and the time has come.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call this meeting of the Local Planning Commission to order at 6:04 p.m. Will you please call the roll?
Sure. Chairman Noble is absent. He's working out of town, and First Vice Chair Belaski, she's absent as well. She's out of the country. Commissioner Rappa?
Here.
Commissioner Clyett?
Here.
Commissioner Hearn?
Here.
Second Vice Chair Wyckoff?
Here. Well, we have a quorum.
And since the appointment has been made of a new Planning Commission member, we need to include him on the roll call because the appointment was official and he was notified. Mr. Pryor will be joining the commission. And we have been instructed that it's not required to swear in, but that anything that we did do could be handled by the clerk during the week. So he's officially part of the Planning Commission, and I think he did plan to be here, so we'll see if he's able to come a little bit late.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the March 11th meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes. I second it.
And just no changes on the minutes. Okay, will you please call the roll for the approval, please?
Sure. Commissioner Pryor? That's the new member. He's not in. Commissioner Clyett?
Here.
Commissioner Hearn?
Here.
Commissioner Rappa?
Approve.
Yep.
And Second Vice Chair Wyckoff?
It's yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the minutes are approved, so we'll move on to new business. First order of new business is to consider a redevelopment plan for the property located at 499 129th Avenue East. The applicant is seeking to build a 60, is this the one we're continuing?
Yes, we're recommending that that item be continued.
Okay.
There was a problem with the notification. Advertisement was not printed properly. So that will be, we're asking it be continued to the next regular meeting.
Okay, in light of the improper advertising, we will move the first item of new business to next month's meeting. The next item is to consider a special exception use for a property located at 15392 2nd Street East. The applicant is seeking to build a two-family unit on this property under Madeira Beach Land Development Regulations, Chapter 10, Article 5, Division C3, Retail Commercial. Section 110-319, Special Exception Uses, Subparagraph 8, Single Family or Duplex, Section 110-320, Minimum Building Site Area Requirements, 1B, Duplex and Triplex Units, 3,000 square feet per dwelling unit, as in the city code. Would the city like to make their presentation, please?
Yes, I'll be presenting on this matter. This is also a quasi-judicial proceeding, so after it's heard at the Planning Commission, this will go to the special magistrate for the final determination.
And we have with us Julia Mandel, who is our land use attorney, and she can help walk us through the quasi-judicial proceeding methodology.
Excellent, thank you.
I apologize. I came up from Tampa and I was a little later.
You were right on time.
I'm sorry I wasn't completely prepared to go ahead and do the quasi-judicial proceeding, but let me just, if you don't mind doing it, just so I can hear how you traditionally do it. Thank you.
All right, to begin with, the staff will make a presentation, and then the petitioner will have an opportunity to cross-examine. Then the petitioner will make whatever presentation they would like, and the staff would cross-examine, and then we will open for public hearing.
Okay, is our petitioner here? Okay, that should go pretty smoothly then, won't it?
That should go faster that way.
Okay, we'll welcome the staff's input.
All right. I will be reading through the report, through the special exception criteria and the analysis the staff has come up with. So, number one, that the use is permitted in a special use. And it is. In section 110-319, special exception uses, number 8 is single family or duplex use. And that is allowed if if it is accepted at the Planning Commission and then also at the Special Magistrate. Number 2, that the use is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience will be protected. The use is cited as a special exception use in the C3 Retail Commercial Division. The use poses no threat to health, safety, or convenience of the community and contributes in a positive manner to the landscape and open space of the neighborhood, thus potentially enhancing public welfare and property value. Criteria 3, that the use will not cause substantial injury to the value of the property in the neighborhood where it is to be located. If you look up at the screen, I also have this in your packets. This shows the property location in red and the surrounding properties on that block. The proposed structure will comply with the standard setbacks for the C3 retail commercial zoning and will not cause substantial injury to the value of other properties in the neighborhood. Criteria 4, that the use will be compatible with the adjoining development and the proposed character of the district where it is to be located. So referring to this aerial photo, within the block, there's an apartment complex, 2 lots designated duplex, triplex, fourplex, 1 single-family resident, 1 vacant commercial lot, and 2 professional office buildings. So if this lot is used as a duplex, the use is compatible with the adjoining development. Criteria 5, that the adequate landscaping and screening is provided as required in the land development regulations or otherwise required. The green space and landscaping will follow C3 retail commercial zoning regulations for duplexes and will be adequate. A new single-family duplex and triplex residential development shall include a minimum of 25% landscape area, which will include native or non-native introduced trees and vegetations, and that's in our Code of Ordinance, Section 106-33. Criteria 6, that adequate off-street parking and loading is provided and ingress and egress is so designated as to cause minimum interference with traffic on abutting streets. The proposed duplex will conform to the property standards in Section 110-971, number of spaces as noted in the table of required parking spaces. Criteria 7, that the use conforms to all applicable regulations governing the district where located, except as many otherwise will be allowed for planned unit developments. The use conforms to all the applicable regulations governed the district where located. Criteria 8, if a variance is so desired and or required, a separate application shall be submitted concurrently with a special exception application. So an administrative waiver was granted to allow the density for 2 residential units. The lot is shy just 64 square feet, so this required an administrative waiver, or we could administratively waive that square footage area. In the C3 district, you have to have a total of 6,000 square feet on the lot to be a duplex. So they were just shy of 64 feet. The comprehensive plan allows 2.5 residential units for a lot with an area of 5,936 square feet. Criteria 9, the special exception will not grant the land more privilege than the best use available in a zone where that special exception use would be a principal permitted use. The duplex will not grant the land more privilege than the best use available in the zone. Criteria 10, no application for special exception use shall be considered by the special magistrate until the applicant has paid in full any outstanding charges, fees, interest, fines, or penalties owed to the city by the applicant or the owner or possessor of the property under any section of the code. All fees have been paid for the special exception review process, and the application has no outstanding charges. So the staff recommendation, staff recommends approval based on the application meeting all the criteria for the special exception.
And Mr. Chair, since the applicant is not present, there
The
would be-
applicant is present, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Here.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
right there.
there you are.
Oh, it is you, okay.
Okay, all right. So this is the opportunity for the applicant to come and ask any cross-examination questions to the staff, if you have any questions about the staff report. Okay.
You okay?
That being the case, then you would be able to get up and speak if you would like to address the board regarding the application? Okay.
Okay.
Well, then we have no questions for them beyond what we have. You would now open the floor for public hearing.
Correct.
And it would be important to remind you that any comments made from the public are just comments about the application. They don't do cross-exam
Right.
to anyone. And that the board needs to be carefully considering those as making findings in your determination, whatever your vote is. You can adopt staff's recommendation and the findings that have been offered, or you can specify other findings, but you need to make your decision based on the case and the criteria that has been outlined here.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this subject from our audience? Of the two of you? Nope. There being none, the public comment time will be closed. Do we have any questions from our planning commission?
I do. My question is about the roof patio plan.
Okay.
That appears that it could possibly be closed in at a later date.
Do you have anything to address on that?
They would not be able to close it in and add a floor unless there was already height that was permitted by the district. They can't just automatically close something in. And since this is a special exception, any amendment they were making to this would have to come back to the board.
They
So
couldn't
this
contribute to
is-
the nonconformity, is that correct?
Correct. No, they could not be making any changes to
This
it.
height is conforming?
Oh, yes. It's a commercial zoning, actually.
Okay.
So essentially, just for clarity, we're really hearing this petition because of 64 square feet of space
No.
required? Is that not
No,
the
you're
case?
hearing this petition because special exceptions are required to come to the plan board. It's something we talked about last month, actually, when we were here. I was proposing that we not have two hearings for these because it has to go to you and then to the magistrate. But given the recent vote, probably it would be going to here and then the Board of Adjustment, and so it would end up getting two citizen review boards for the same item. So I was proposing that we change the code to have only one citizen quasi-judicial hearing, but at this point, this is the process that's required. And so the 64 square feet is a very minor amendment.
Right.
And I was able to grant that by administrative waiver.
I see, okay,
And so that has already been granted.
okay, perfect. Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions from our planning commission? Do I have a motion from anyone to approve or deny the petition?
I'll make a motion to approve,
Okay,
to consider a special exception use for property located at 15392 Second Street East, seeking to build a two-family unit on this property under Madera Beach Land Development Regulations, Chapter 10, Article 5, Division C3, Retail Commercial Section, Special Exception Uses, Single-Family or Duplex, Section 110-320. Minimum building site area requirements, duplex and triplex units, 3,000 square feet per dwelling unit.
okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a
And
second.
May I ask, are those based on the findings presented by staff?
We should add to the motion
I need
that-
that clarification by the motion.
Right.
Is it your intent to recommend approval based on the findings as presented by staff?
It's my recommendation to, based on staff's recommendation to approve.
Okay, so we're amending that motion to include the language to say that we are adopting the staff's recommendations
As findings?
as findings
As,
And the
in
second-
granting the petition.
And the seconder would have to agree to that.
And would the person who made the second
I
agree to
agree.
that? Perfect, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Commissioner Rappa,
Yes.
Commissioner Clyett,
yes.
Commissioner Hearn,
Yes.
Commissioner Pryor,
Yes, I have reviewed it and all. I'm a little late, went to the airport. It took me 2.5 hours to get to the airport
Oh, boy.
and back. I've learned the lesson. Don't do it.
and second Vice Chair Wyckoff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so the petition is approved, and we will move on to the next item of new business. Item TCH 2019-04, a city-sponsored ordinance amendment to the City of Madeira Beach Code of Ordinances, Chapter 110 zoning, Article 6, supplementary district regulations, Division 5, glare and lighting. Section 110-501, updating purpose to include information about nesting and hatchlings and include federal regulated lights. Also, Section 110-502 to include definitions. Section 110-503, referring to protection for property owners. Section 110-504, indicating general standards within sea turtle conservation zone. Section 110-505, describing full lighting standards within the sea turtle conservation zone. Section 110-506, addressing publicly owned lighting in the beach area. And Section 110-507, addressing temporary lighting standards. City, please.
So currently, we have Section 110-501 that does discuss glare and lighting, where we discuss the lighting on the beach in regards to sea turtle hatchlings and nesting season. This is really going back in there and revamping this. We've been working with the Sea Turtle Conservancy and also the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. So I'm just going to go through, I have a presentation that'll just kind of walk us through the changes to this ordinance. So Section 110-503.
And there is a presentation behind you if you're interested
Yes,
in
sorry.
seeing it that way.
No, and this was already in there, no person or business can create any light on another off-site property or the beaches. This is to protect property owners. It doesn't really discuss anything about the sea turtles, but this was already in the ordinance, and we think it's essential to keep. This ordinance would also create a sea turtle conservation zone. So everything after starting at 502, Section 110-502, would really address areas within the sea turtle conservation zone, and that's also discussed within the ordinance. So it would be everything along the beach, Gulf Boulevard, and then the properties just east of Gulf Boulevard, seen in this photo. So in Section 110-504, this is where we start talking about the sea turtles, their hatchlings and nestings. These are the general standards, and we refer back to this throughout the entire ordinance. That the point, source of light, or reflective surfaces of the light fixture shall not be directly visible from the beach. Light shall not be directly or indirectly illuminated any portion of the beach or dune system. The light shall not be cumulatively illuminate any portion of the beach or dune system, and that if the light does not meet the standards, it must be turned off during the sea turtle season. So currently, our ordinance does have that all the lights need to be turned off within the sea turtle season. So that would stay the same. So Section 110-505, lighting within the sea turtle conservation zone. This is kind of an overview of what the changes are. Any builders of new beachfront properties or Gulf Boulevard properties are required to follow the lighting guidelines and approved lighting plans. Any new lights on existing buildings must follow the lighting guidelines that we'll go over. And then existing lights, they'll either need to follow the new lighting guidelines or be turned off if they're visible or cumulatively visible from the beach during that sea turtle season. So what is considered sea turtle friendly lighting? These are the three things to think of. Keep it low, so low mounting, high and low bulb wattage. Keep it shielded, so use full cutoff fixtures that direct the light downward towards the ground. Shield fixtures so you cannot see the bulb, lamp, or glowing lens, and keep it long. So sea turtles are less disturbed by the long wavelengths of light, 560 nanometers or longer. These are lights that are yellow, amber, and red. Here's some examples of the sea turtle friendly fixtures. So now we get to the ordinance. So I'll just briefly be going over these, and this is written within the new ordinance, or revisions into the ordinance. Lighting within the sea turtle conservation zone, uplighting, floodlights, spotlights are prohibited, or you can turn them off. Exterior ceiling mounted fixtures are prohibited or can be turned off. Safety or security lights shall comply with the general standards that we went over before. Reposition fixtures, recess or shield lighting, replace bulbs, replace with directional fixtures, or turn off the lights. Pole-mounted lights are only used for state or federally regulated lights that can be no higher than 25 feet. They'll either have to be turned off during the sea turtle nesting season or comply with the wildlife lighting. Parking lights must comply with the wildlife lighting, no higher than 48 inches, shielded, and vehicular parking and roadway lighting cannot be visible from the beach as well. Dune walkover lighting is prohibited. That's a Florida statute. Landscape lighting must be in accordance with the wildlife lighting. The stairwells or elevator shafts, parking garages, and windows must also comply. General standards. Signs must be on the landward side of the building, and when signs must be on the seaward side, signs may only be externally illuminated with long wavelength lighting. That's the amber, red lighting. Tinted glass for interior lighting. The tinted glass at 45% transmittance or less on all windows and doors. The utility lights or security lights must also comply with the general standards. Outdoor gas lights shall be top shielded and not visible from the beach. So here's some examples of sea turtle friendly lighting. On the left is before and on the right is after. So that one's shielded. Just to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. So in section 110.506, public-owned lighting, street lights, lighting at parks, and other publicly owned beach access areas shall be in compliance with all the general standards and must have wildlife lighting or lights will have to be turned off during that turtle season. Section 110.507, temporary lighting. Temporary lighting cannot exceed 30 days. All lighting must comply with the general standards and not be mounted higher than 8 feet above the ground. And earlier today, I was actually talking to to Laura Wright. She contacted us about the ordinance and she had some suggestions. So that's what this handout, this updated handout was. She gave me some suggestions, which we'll go over. Her suggestions are in blue. They're also sitting on the back table if y'all wanted to look at it. You grabbed it? Okay. And she's from Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So we can go over the additional information to the definitions in section 110.502. Turtle nesting season, she wanted to extend, or she suggested to extend. So it means from the period of May 1st through October 31st of the year, or until all sea turtle nests are no longer present on the beach, whichever is later. Actually, above that, the tinted glass, instead of 45% of the transmittance value, she was suggesting 15%. Under wildlife lighting, section D, lamps emit only long wavelength light greater than, instead of 560 nanometers, she recommended 580 nanometers, so that's a change there. And section 110.504, this kind of refers back to the sea turtle season. So light sources that do not meet the specified standards and are visible from the beach shall be turned off from, instead of 10 to 7, she suggested sunset each night until sunrise each morning. From the period of May 1st to October 31st of each year, or until all sea turtle nests are no longer present on the beach, whichever is later. Section 110-505, lighting within the sea turtle conservation zone. Number 2, uplighting, floodlights, spotlights, or any type of lighting that contributes to sky glow and that are visible from the beach, both directly and indirectly, are prohibited. Turn the page. Number 5 addresses the sea turtle season, changing it from sunset to sunrise, and from May 1st to October 31st, or until nests are no longer present. Same issue on number 6A. Item 13, the tinted glass, changing that from 45 to 15, like she recommended in the definitions. And then additionally, blackout drapery or shade screens are preferred to block interior lighting. The turning out of all unnecessary interior lights during the nesting season is strongly encouraged. Section 110-506, the public-owned lighting. She recommended on number 1, whenever possible, streetlights shall be located or angled so that they will not illuminate the beach. In instances where streetlights may not be located to prevent illuminating the beach, full cut-off features with long wavelength, wildlife lighting, preferably amber or red LEDs, and a minimum of 180-degree shielding shall be installed and or used. Number 2, that section, also refers back to the sea turtle nesting season. Section 110-507, temporary lighting. That also addresses the sea turtle nesting season, extending it from May to October 31st, or until the sea turtle nests are no longer present, and then from sunset to sunrise. And she also have, I don't have it in front of me, but you received an email correspondence of us earlier today, and she recommended some more information on pool lighting and public street and roadway and parking lighting. Let me go grab that.
And, Mr. Chair, we just got these this afternoon and didn't have a chance to really look them over and make sure that, yeah, it's a lot to throw at us at the very last minute. And we're very comfortable going forward with what we've already proposed. It's not that we want to be less protective, but we always have to make sure that if we're making additional changes to our code, they integrate properly with the rest of the code, and that we have a scientific basis for these regulations. There has to be a connection between what we're requiring people to do and what positive outcome we're expecting from it. So I'm inclined to ask that you consider the staff's recommendation, and that we always got another year to come back before the next season. It's really important that we go ahead and get the changes put in place for this season. So I don't want to hold up what we've already proposed by making us take time out and go back and reconsider this long list of additional things, but really think that it's best if we have time to sort through everything and come back to you with a recommendation on these.
Fair enough. Would it be appropriate to make some housekeeping changes if we were to address some of the frequent items where it's a time, like 10 p.m. until, would it be reasonable to say we would change that to be sunset to sunrise, or?
Well, you know, we're inclined.
Without getting into the nitpicky, how many
to want to
lumens?
do that, except that we don't have yet in front of us a scientific basis for
Okay.
that. And so the 10 o'clock measure is already in our code, and so
Okay.
we're comfortable with it being defensible. But if we change it dramatically without first having some scientific basis and some findings behind it,
Right.
we are concerned that from a legal standpoint, it would not be defensible this year.
Yeah, I can see where where you're talking about the transmittal rate with the glass, it could be a little bit oppressive to people who own beachfront property.
Oh, definitely.
Or a lot oppressive.
We did have to back way off what was recommended there, because they would actually just prefer it's basically not visible.
Yeah.
And, you know, if people need to be able to see out their windows.
For safety.
Yes, of course. So, and there are other ways of doing it, you know, with the type of lighting that people use, and just turning off the lighting is very effective as well. So we didn't want to get oppressive with the regulation. And also, we have to be able to enforce it.
That's what I was going to, who's the enforcer of this?
Well,
I mean,
now,
that's a lot
what
to
we're-
cover.
Yeah, what we're proposing here is that new things that are built in the future, or things that we're going to require a permit, will meet a new standard. But if you have something already in place, you can continue to use it if it's effective in this way. If not, you can just turn it off like you always have. So these changes would occur over time with new development or with redevelopment. And in that case, the building codes enforcement staff would be looking at every plan as it comes in. We worked extensively with the building department to go over the codes, and a lot of what you see here was actually recommended from the building department based on code changes that have been recommended to them from building codes and standards.
Okay. And these, I'm assuming that some of the things that are proposed by staff, are in accordance with other neighboring communities that have like ordinances?
Insofar as some are gradually getting more and more tied to the scientific base regulations that the Conservancy has been proposing.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, the building codes, Florida Building Code people are recommending a whole set of fixtures and lighting regulations to accomplish this, and are providing a lot of backup material and support for local governments making the change. So we think that a lot of the beach communities who have not already will be coming along to make additional changes.
Okay,
I mean,
and
some of we have specific communities that we're directed to look at, but in some cases, they may not have as much beach space as we have.
Right.
So the pressures on them to regulate and to protect are not as intense.
And if we were to go too far, it could invalidate everything anyway.
Well, we don't want to, we
If
don't
it's
want to do
unenforceable.
anything that we can't enforce, number one, and that we can't defend. We don't want to
Right.
lose a whole ordinance over not having a good basis for the regulation. There has to be that connection, you know, I'm always talking about, between what we require people to do and what public good would be accomplished by that regulation. And we need to have some scientific data behind us before we can recommend any additional changes.
Understood. Okay, thank you for that. Does that wrap up the city's presentation? Yeah,
Yes.
thank
Yes,
you.
it does.
Anyone from the public like to speak to the matter? Of course, please.
Yes, but
Please
please
go
come
to
up.
the podium,
to the
if you would,
podium.
please.
I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but could you turn there's a button on that microphone, otherwise it doesn't get into the record at all. On top of the tall microphone there should be a button.
It says it's on.
Oh,
We have help coming. Here comes the
comes the
cavalry.
tech guy. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, we do this every year, and every year it's, well, we don't have data to do it, but I don't think I can fight that at this point, but there is at least one typo I'd like to see fixed. If you look on page 2, it states that long wavelength light is 580 nanometers, and then later on we talk about a long wavelength of being 560. It seems to be either a typo or arbitrarily changed.
Well, oh, no, it wouldn't be arbitrary, so it would be a typo. If you could check to see which is appropriate, Jen.
The other one is on page, section 110.502. It's at the end of it, right before it goes to 110.503.
So it was 502, and where else was it?
It's 502, am I missing a page here? I might be missing a page here.
502,
502, right before it goes to 503, section D,
Okay.
or
I got
D.
that
Okay, it's
one.
section D, 502,
Goes to 560.
section D, lamps emit only
Under-
long wavelength light greater than 560 nanometers or longer. And then where was the first one? I'm sorry,
The first one is on the second page, about, two-thirds of the way down, under long wavelength.
I see
it's
that, yes.
alphabetical.
So we have a
Okay, thank you.
definition
It is
of,
defined as
on
500.
page 2, we have a definition of long wavelength, and it says which means wavelengths greater than 580 nanometers, or nanometers, sorry, I'll say it right, I'll pick one way to say it and stick with it. And then on D, we've got long wavelength light defined as 560 there, so.
Yeah, I think that's already been corrected. Thank you, because.
It has been corrected.
Yes, because I have a version here where we were making corrections earlier, found the typos and things.
So you do have it
It's
corrected?
580.
580, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and is there any chance of feedback to let us know exactly what it is we need to give you that you can consider to be scientific proof?
And for the amount of light or the time of day?
To get sunset to sunrise is what Fish and Wildlife has had out there for as long as I've been involved in it.
Right.
Longer than that, way longer than that.
Yeah, well, if we get more information from them between now and the commission hearing, the commission can also change this. I mean, it is in front of the planning commission right now, and by the time we get to the city commission, we'd hope to have something specific we can give to them on that. We'll continue to research it too, so the more data we've got going into that, the stronger that would be. The staff being conservationists by nature, we would like to do that, but we just need to make sure all the attorneys are real happy with it.
And if I could just make a statement, that the premise is they already have a standard in the code, so if it's going to be changed, which would affect potentially a property right, you need to have scientific journals, some kind of evidence, testimony as part of the record to indicate why having that light turned off earlier would have a more positive effect than having it go off at 10. And it's just simply making sure that evidence is at the record, just in case somebody were to take an action against the ordinance. You don't want to throw the whole thing out over that issue without having the basis for it.
So we'd be glad to get your input. If you could get Jenny your contact information, we'll bring you in and talk to you about what we're finding, and it'd be glad to look at whatever you have available.
And just for a matter of housekeeping, if you wouldn't mind providing your name so we have it for the record.
Oh, Janet Mealia.
Thank you.
I work with Laura Wright.
Perfect, okay.
Oh, good. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Yes, sir?
Robert Preston, 425 South Bay Shore Drive, Madera Beach. Yeah, I was looking at some of those things, and 15% seems like, well, you got to turn your lights off.
Right.
And not live in your apartment or condo when you're on the beach type thing. So that seemed kind of restrictive. But I agree with protecting the turtles a lot. And I've heard about this meeting being about the turtles and stuff, and I don't know where we bring this up, but when people, our beach goers, dig 2 and 3 foot holes on our beach, we ought to be able to prevent that somehow when our people go up and our city people go up and down the beach and say you can't do that during this period because the hatchlings get stuck in those holes, or the sea turtle coming up trying to lay their eggs get stuck and they don't make it. And it creates a problem in itself. And I don't know where this is to be addressed. I know it's not part of the lighting, but I think it's an important part of the whole picture. And I would like to figure out where we get that done at. So, thank you.
I don't think anyone disagrees with that. We'll need
No,
to look into that at some point.
Yes, so we'll look into the exact policy. We do have a policy for fill your hole. We don't necessarily have one that says don't dig them to begin with during sea turtle periods. So, and we have trouble. Somebody dug a huge hole out there the other day, and it actually required equipment to fill back in. You know, it was like as high as a person. So it takes constant management, definitely. But we'll look at that, and we'll have that ready at the commission meeting, too, to talk about where that citation is and if it needs to be enhanced.
Yeah.
Technically, the commission.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to see the Parks and Rec person go up and down the beach at least 2 or 3 times a day.
Yeah, they are out there at least twice a day, but it's a lot to keep track of, and the staff also has to deal with the rest of the community, so they're on and off the beach. But we'll be able to address that more specifically when we get to the commission.
And maybe at some point our signage at the walkovers includes something to that effect as well. You know, where we have no glass, no dogs, don't dig any holes.
No holes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody does that with malicious intent, right? I mean, but it's just ignorance to the facts of how things work, and we certainly want to support our sea turtles. I actually found one in front of my office across Gulf Boulevard. Broke my heart, but he was alive, and we saved him. And he got released by the Clearwater Aquarium. We were so happy. So that was good. But anyway, yeah, we want to do everything we can to protect our natural resources. That's for sure. That's for sure. So any other questions from the panel? From the public? I don't see anyone. Anybody? Any discussion from our planning commission?
I do have.
Go right ahead.
As I read this, basically, it's like a federal or a state regulations, specifications and all. And if you look down under tinted glass means, where it went from 45 to 15, it already says industry approved. So people have looked at this over a long time. Okay? So they've come up with this, and it seems to me that 45, I think 15, you'd be stumbling in the dark. I don't think you need quite like that. Pulling drapes, et cetera, that's an individual type thing. Whether or not you want to pull your drapes every night, well, okay, that's fine. But it's something that you can't regulate. So if you go to the 45%, as the industry states, I think that's adequate enough. When it comes down to a couple other things, the sunset to sunrise is good, okay, that's fine. 10 o'clock sometimes, it depends. The season is okay as well. Let's do it during the turtle season. When you go from 560 to 580 nanometers, I don't know if you know what a nanometer is, but you can't see it. It's a wavelength, okay, and it's over this. And it's a very, very difficult thing to quantify. If you have a light and you say it's at 580 nanometers, well, that's interesting, but it will vary so often. It's like your lights. Sometimes they're a little dimmer than others. If you went from, say, the USA to some other country and they are at 50 cycles and you're at 60, you don't really know that 60 cycles per second. Your eyes don't perceive it. But what's going to happen is if you install these lights, over time, they're going to vary. So let's don't get too tied up with 580 nanometers, okay? That's just it's going to be an average is what it's going to be. Some will be longer, some will be shorter. If you go to buy one, they always say on the light bulb, 110 to 100 and what? 25 volts for your light bulb. It's because everything's varying. How many people saw the brownout the other day in the city? I mean, I went through that. I couldn't figure out what in the heck was going on. All my LEDs in the house stayed on. All the regular lights went off. So I had a lot of lights on because I got basically LED. Yeah, certain things happen. Everything cut off except that. But my point is, in time, all of these lights will change. The filaments change. They get older. You can't sit here and tell everybody at a certain time, replace them. So let's don't get too carried away with very specific. It's the intent is to take care of the turtles and to do these right things. And the last thing I had, one more thing was on the last page of this where it talks about, I got it hung up here a little, violations. That's going to be a very tricky thing to do, isn't it? So I guess we leave it open-ended. Talking about penalties, one thing or another. I suppose we have to leave that as well. The way it is, we can't specify certain penalties for this. What we got to do is really broadcast to the public and to all of our residents that this is a guideline we need to follow. We can state that it's strict rules, but it's really not going to be more than what the industry is expecting. But it's a lot better than what we're doing today.
I don't think any of it's meant to be punitive. It's to be protective of our natural resources, for sure. And you're right, getting caught up in the letter of the law can sometimes trip you up as opposed to the intent. But having said that, I think we're generally seeing consensus forming. So is there any other discussion that we need to have?
I just would, in response, state that sometimes the specificity in the regulation for instance, a 580 or 560, 580 was something that it would be designated on a purchased item, not that we're going to go out and meter everybody's lights. We have to start somewhere. Sure. And I wholeheartedly agree in regards to the 45 and the 15%. The staff had gotten together to review that ahead of time, and we're very uncomfortable going to the 15. You would not be able to see out, and that's a problem in terms of enforcement in particular, but just it's excessive, and we would not be able to defend that specifically. That's not something that typically other cities have gone to. And so, again, I agree that the whole purpose is protection here, and in most cases what will happen is people will just continue to turn their lights out, or if they don't, then we will be enforcing. Okay. To remind people. But I also want to let you know that from an administrative standpoint, although that's beyond your purview to weigh in on, we want to let you know that this will be accompanied by a considerably heftier and more polished public relations program, and we're getting materials ordered and a real public information process put together to make sure that we get the word out to everybody. So anything that goes on here is of no use to us if it can't be implemented. And the people in this community generally will, at least the permanent residents, will embrace the protection of the turtles. But it's incumbent upon us to not just notify the long-term residents, but on an ongoing basis, we're going to have to let people know, the short-termers and visitors know what our concerns are and how they should be managing their light emissions as well.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you. Anyone in a position to make a motion to approve or deny the staff's recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve Division 5 glare and lighting as proposed here with the conditional that it's changed from sunset to sunrise. Other than that, as proposed.
And at 45%.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we're keeping the 45.
Right.
That's, the only change we'll make is sunrise to sunset.
Okay, so for clarification, we have a motion to approve the city's proposal with the amendment to any time references going from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. being changed to sunset to sunrise. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Do I have a second to that motion?
I second that motion.
Okay. Will you please call for the vote?
Sure. Commissioner Pryor?
Yes.
Commissioner Clyett?
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn?
Yes.
Commissioner Rappa?
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Wyckoff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item of new business. TCH 2019-5, a city-sponsored ordinance amendment to the City of Madeira Beach Code of Ordinances, Chapter 58, Streets, Sidewalks, and Other Public Places, Article 2, Sidewalks and Driveways, Section 58-32, Driveways, Specifications, Subparagraph C, to exclude driveway flares from measurement between a two-driveway entrance. City, please.
Okay, so currently, the Code of Ordinances does not really clearly address it addresses the width between a two-entrance driveway. Right here, I have an example, kind of where we measure right now. Driveways can have flares, a 3-foot flare, which is shown in the red. It's right behind you, sorry. This is not in your packet. So that red flare, that's a 3-foot flare that we were describing in this change of the ordinance, that the measurement between the two entry driveway would exclude that flare dimension. And we've had a lot of requests of this because many of our lots here in Madeira are just so small that it's hard to get a two-entrance driveway with that 6 feet, including those little red flares that you see up on the screen. And those flares help people drive in and out of the driveways.
Okay. Anyone from the public like to make a comment on this matter? Being none, anyone on the Planning Commission have a question or discussion?
I have a comment.
Okay.
Many times, if you look at this picture, you'll have pavers that actually are part of the sidewalk. So it would make sense to do this because the sidewalk, in certain areas, and this one looks like it could be, where you really want a sidewalk built through there. And this could be part of the sidewalk if we go through that. So, yes, I agree with this.
All right. Any further discussion from anyone? Comments? Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the city-sponsored ordinance amendment to the City of Madeira Beach Code of Ordinance, Chapter 58, Streets, Sidewalks, and Other Public Places, Article 2, Sidewalks and Driveways, Section 5832, Driveways, Specification C, to exclude driveway flares from measurement between a two driveway entrances.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the Planning Commission? Please call for the vote.
Commissioner Rappa?
Yes.
Commissioner Clyett?
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn?
Yes.
Commissioner Pryor?
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Wyckoff?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to the next item of new business, TCH 2019-6, 110-06, a city-sponsored ordinance amendment to the City of Madeira Beach Code of Ordinances, Chapter 110, zoning, Article 6, supplementary district regulations, Division 11, swimming pools, Section 110-721, patios, lighting, designed to include patio height, and adding standards for patios and paved decks in yards that front an open body of water. City, please.
This is also something that keeps recurring. So the Code of Ordinances currently does not clearly address the height above grade with paved patio decks without pools. So Chapter 110 zoning, Article 6, Supplementary District Regulation, Division 11, in Section 110-718, states that a swimming pool which projects above finished grade more than 1 foot shall not be permitted in any yard that fronts an open water body. This is very similar to that. It just clarifies later on in the section. The proposed amendment clarifies that all patios cannot exceed 1 foot above finished grade, whether they have a pool or not. And if the applicant provides a letter of support by a qualified and registered design professional showing that there's no drainage issues on their property or neighboring properties, the patio can project up above 3 feet above finished grade.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to suggest something, because this specifies no harmful diversion of floodwaters, and that's something that we will not be able to measure adequately for the neighbor's satisfaction, and so it should actually not allow any off-site runoff, which is a standard anyway. No one is supposed to create off-site, nobody is supposed to create any new off-site runoff from their property with any form of development. So I would suggest that we use the existing standard for that.
Okay, so as we're reading the additional language, subparagraph D, where we have line 3, a vertical height greater than 12 inches shall not be approved unless it creates no excessive off-site runoff.
Unless it creates no new off-site runoff.
No, unless it creates no new off-site runoff. And then that would strike from after the word unless, starting with the word an, through the word structures. Is that correct? So we'd be striking an analysis prepared by a qualified and registered design professional demonstrates no harmful diversion of floodwaters or wave runup and waves reflection that would increase damage to the building or structure or adjacent building and structures. Is that correct?
Correct. Does that get to where you were trying to get?
I think it might be 12 inches shall not be approved unless an analysis prepared by a qualified or registered design professional demonstrates no new
That it creates no new
off-site.
off-site runoff?
Yeah, I think that makes a little bit more sense.
Okay. Does our attorney have any commentary?
I apologize, yes.
It's
I mean,
okay.
that seems, you do want to make sure that the standard is one that's measurable, and it sounds like using that language.
Make sure your
is the best way to
microphone
ensure that it's measurable.
Okay, so let's, I'll read this paragraph D again from the beginning. A patio or paved deck which projects above the finished grade more than 1 foot shall not be permitted in any yard that fronts an open water body. A patio that has a vertical height greater than 12 inches shall not be approved unless an analysis prepared by a qualified and registered design professional demonstrates that it creates no new off-site runoff.
That sounds to me like, whoa, it's very loud. Yes, that would be a measurable standard upon which can be enforced.
Okay, thank you. Everyone clear on what we're talking about at this point? Okay, any other discussion? Anyone in the mood to make a motion?
I do have a question.
Oh, I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I didn't ask for the
You
public
got a
input.
public one here
I
first.
apologize, sir.
Yes,
Mr. Preston, please come forward.
Robert Preston, 425 South Bay Shore. So I'm trying to understand, I'm just, there's construction going on in this town that is just running through my brain right now. And Bay Point is one of those. Every one of those houses that are being built currently are about 3 foot above the street. That's creating runoff into the street in other areas. It's creating runoff into the water as well. So in your description of creating runoff, those would all be in violation.
In most cases, people building a new house are not creating new runoff as much, because as long as they're going up on a footprint that existed before, they get credit for the amount of or type of runoff that they created in the past. And what we've been doing is analyzing the lots and the runoff, and everybody who comes in has to have a sloping or a means of ensuring that they're not running off onto the neighboring property, but that the runoff amount that they're creating onto the street is similar to that, which they've already been creating, that they already have credit for. We actually are looking at every single site, and it's for that reason that we don't allow fill to come in, extensive amounts of fill to come in. We are allowing people to bring their garage up higher than the crown of the road, otherwise.
Right, and I see that right on.
The street runs right in, yeah. Otherwise, the street runoff ends up on their property too, so.
So all those are exceptions to what you just said you wanted to put in the ordinance.
What we're talking about here is the pools specifically, when people are creating new pervious or impervious space in their backyards. And the higher, there are some FEMA standards as to how high you can get anything in the backyard or adjacent to the water anyway. But currently we have a standard that says you can't have pools more than 12 inches above the grade. So people have had sometimes to regrade, because you know that some lots are very steep to the seawall even before they build, and sometimes it's worse after they build. But we're trying to get them to build in a way that they're not building up those big, huge seawalls, a secondary seawall in the backyard.
Right, I understand.
Which is what's been happening.
So, but this is specific to pools and not to the lot and building of itself, because it's not clear.
This is actually pertains to the patio and the deck, because we have something that prevents the pool from going too high, but sometimes people come in and they want to just build these massive patios that are way high as well, even without a pool, and because they don't have a pool in it, they weren't regulated. So we're trying to make sure that just flat patios aren't higher than the grade, substantially higher than the grade, just because they don't have a pool in it. There was kind of a loophole there.
Okay, thank you very much. And I apologize for not being prepared for some of this stuff. I was on the city website for 45 minutes and could not find an agenda for this meeting.
Okay. I'll show you how to find it, because I have it up here.
It's supposed to be easier, but I could not find it. I could go right to the commissioners, but not planning and zoning. I even clicked on the date, today's date for meetings, and there's nothing there.
Thank you for letting us know that.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about skipping that part, but thank you, Mr. Preston. Anyone, discussion or a motion? Yes, sir?
When we talk about this, and it's a foot or so, let me give you an example. Next door to me, they're building a new home. They've graded down the lot, they've filled it back up, they built a new seawall. The seawall is 8 inches above my property, my seawall. When they abut, they're 8 inches above. When they build their patio, they built it on a slope, okay? And it goes up, and then you have a pool, and that pool ledge is about 4 to 6 inches above the deck, which is on an incline. So when you really look at it from my ground up to that point, they're sloping up about a foot or so, and then some more, and then some more, and then a pool. If I didn't have a concrete wall, my house is 1950 version, and I got a block concrete wall between me and them. So whatever they want to do, it's not going to flood me. If I didn't have that, everything that hits their house, if they don't have gutters and all their runoff would run onto my yard because of the way that is built up. Not just the seawall, plus all the other dirt they've hauled in, plus pavers, which is all good. But you can see where this would go. And then if you look at this last little point there, it says patios may not project above finished grade more than 3 feet. How did that get there if we're saying in the first part that paved deck or patio can't be above finished grade 1 foot? What am I missing here? Am I the only one that sees that?
That's so if they have a letter from a qualified and registered design professional, they can go up to 3 feet.
Yeah, if you see the sentence before, a patio that has a vertical height greater than 12 inches shall now be approved unless it's proven that there's no harmful effect of it.
But, okay, so this says that under no condition can a patio be more than 3 feet.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, that's the
Do
limit.
you understand what that does to an adjacent property? If you have a patio 3 feet above the next door neighbor?
I'm imagining that within our site plan approval process, there is adequate protection for the runoff.
Oh, for runoff, yes.
Because if we're elevating a patio 3 feet, of course, we're assuming then the land is going to be built up, or,
Yes.
and that would create some additional.
So some of what's happening is they build the patio directly out from the house. And the ground continues to slope down. And so at the end, the patio is actually sitting up 3 feet above the ground by the time it gets down to the seawall because of the slope. It's,
But an adjacent property like mine, if you're sitting up 3 feet,
right,
and these are small lots, here's the whole problem. You got a small lot. They're building a house that's got about, 5 or 7 feet from my old block wall, and that water's got to go somewhere.
and we have been requiring the owners to create swales and drainage systems through their seawall. There's all kinds of things that we're going through upon analysis to make sure that the water is directed back out to the bay.
Well, you're doing good with the pavers because they're such built that the water hopefully will go through there. But during some of these big rains, boy, it gets mighty testy.
Yeah, we
So this,
actually
to me,
don't,
is a little bit strange, okay?
we don't give them credit for pavers because those pavers are only going to drain if they have a substantially, properly engineered base to allow
Right,
it to percolate, and most people don't design to that, so they
Right.
don't get credit for that.
And they're
We
sealed
consider
and
it
whatnot, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think the intent here, correct me if I'm wrong, is to create some consistency so that we don't have a misunderstanding about someone who has a pool versus someone who doesn't have a pool that can or cannot build a patio. Because right now, it's sort of the Wild West. If you don't have the pool, you can build the patio wherever you want to.
Right, and we've had some really wild patios coming in way up high in the air that almost really create a 4 or 5 foot wall along the coast, which is definitely not what's intended. The 3 feet as a limit really comes into play when you look at the FEMA regulations. We're not allowed to have anything over 36 inches in the rear yard, and so we held it to that for that reason, to be consistent with the FEMA code. But if 3 feet sounds too high, you can recommend a different standard.
Okay? Anyone? Do we have any?
Can I mention one more thing?
Of course you
I'm
can.
sorry. I had this on, what about, and this is all new construction? Is that what this about?
Yes.
Yes.
Only new construction, because I have a pool, and I have a block wall around it, and it's a lot higher than 1 foot.
The the block wall around the property,
The pool.
around the pool.
Yeah, it's built up, it's got like a little patio around the pool. But this is 1950 now, okay?
Right.
And it has cracks, I know, I understand all that. But if I were to rebuild it, if I had to rebuild the pool, couldn't I build it back the same way? Because this doesn't address
Yeah, well, we do have separate standards for garden walls.
For what?
For a garden wall, we would consider that a garden wall, and you can have those as high as 3 feet. So if your little 1-foot wall would not be a problem.
You mean, did you say a garden wall?
Garden.
This is a wall from my pool.
Yeah, it's,
Well, okay, I just want to make sure we have an understanding. Okay,
Sounds like you're in good shape.
maybe so. Okay.
Very good? Yeah. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, anyone with a motion?
I'll make the motion, we accept it.
Okay,
As changed with the no new offset runoff.
okay. So we have a motion to approve the city-sponsored ordinance with a minor change in the language to read that an analysis will be prepared by a qualified and registered design professional demonstrating that it creates no new off-site runoff. That will be the change to that paragraph. Okay, we have that motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second
I'll
it.
second.
Sounds like a third, too. Okay. All right, will you call for the vote, please?
Commissioner Clyett,
Yes.
Commissioner Pryor,
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn,
Yes.
Commissioner Rappa,
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Wyckoff.
Yes. The next order of new business, TCH 2019-07, an ordinance of the City of Madeira Beach amending Division 10, Planned Development, Section 110-386, Purpose of Planned Development District, Strengthening Purpose and Intent. Section 110-387, Uses Permitted, Addressing Compatibility and Setting Standards for Mixed Uses. Section 110-388, Application for PD zoning, specifying submission requirements and design criteria. Section 110-389, Procedure for Approval of PD zoning, adding specific procedures for review. Section 110-391, Review by Local Planning Agency, specifying responsibilities and specifying review criteria. Section 110-392, Neighborhood Information Meeting, requiring meeting be held before local planning agency meeting and be reported as an element of the application. City, please.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we're going to do this in 2 parts, and I'm going to explain to you how we got to the place we are and why we're talking about this tonight, but then also I have some additions that I've noticed as I was reviewing this need to be made, and I think the attorney also has a presentation with some additional fine-tuning.
Okay.
And I apologize for this not being all prepared together. This is an issue that needs to be addressed quickly, and so we put it on the agenda at the very last of the cutoff based on the referral from the City Commission, so we didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare and work as a team. And I'm also going to ask Ms. Rowan to have some mercy on me since I interfered with her last presentation and didn't give her the review before she made the presentation. Who knows what she will do. Right now, we have a PD regulation that refers to the site plan criteria as being required as part of the PD application process. And that's all, it works, and it's legal, but it is creating confusion on the part of not the Planning Commission, but the Board of Commissioners when it gets there, and sometimes the public. And has not been informed very well defended in the past when questions have come out about how appropriate that is. One of the reasons it's a problem is right now, the PD section, as it says, it refers to all of its requirements as being found in the site plan section, a whole other section of the code. And it specifies that it has to include all of these items as they're appropriate for review. And the interpretation legally and historically as to what's appropriate for review is made by the administrative reviewer, which would be me or my staff. And that's always been upheld by the courts and has been the standard. However, it's a little bit confusing because some of the things in that long list of site plan requirements include things you cannot actually get during a preliminary approval. For instance, we have to show complete concurrency based on local roads or local drainage criteria. And in a lot of cases here in Madeira Beach, the local roads are regulated by FDOT. They manage concurrency based on what their standards are. And then, of course, the runoff in a lot of cases is regulated on by always by SWIFMUD, ultimately the Water Management District. And they have their standards, which actually may not even be as harsh as ours in the comp plan, but at any rate, we have to ultimately get approval from FDOT and from the Water Management District in order to show we have met all concurrency requirements for the code. However, the state does not allow local governments to base their approval contingent upon state agency review. And so they will not give us a final review until after we've approved the site plan. We can get a preliminary review and a letter from them that they have done preliminary review, but we cannot get a final determination of concurrency and a final determination of review during the PD process. We have to actually adopt it first. So, as I said, what typically happens is the staff reviews it, and we will stipulate that, as you see in conditional approvals, you've seen me come to you with PDs before. We've collected enough information from them to know that when they do get to a final letter from FDOT or from the Water Management District, they will be able to meet the standard because we have a preliminary review. We also have our own engineering review to back that up and satisfy it. And so what we do is we recommend that it's approval conditional upon their meeting all of the letter of the law at the point at which they're able to get that, before we do a site plan. So we would go through the PD process, and they would still have to submit a more detailed plan at the very end that includes all of that, all of the requirements before we stamp their plans and let them actually start to use the site. That's the way it's done everywhere. And so we've been proceeding under that, using that direction, and we specify, as you'll recall, line by line, you remember that long list of conditions, what things have been met at this point, what things will be met at a different point in the process, but that we know there's enough turned in that we know they will eventually be able to meet all of the conditions before getting a site plan approval. So that approach has been challenged in the past, and my take on it is that it maybe wasn't adequately defended, but at any rate, there was concern that stating you're required to have a final site plan in something where you're not allowed to have a final site plan is just confusing and contradictory, and it creates it creates a problem for the commission or even for you when you go to list your findings of fact to state that they are approved. Now, you should be able to base that on the professional recommendation you've got because these are quasi-judicial. We're presenting you with professional findings. But I know the Board of Commissioners, or at least a couple of them, would feel more comfortable if the standard for the PD was specified in the PD section as opposed to referring to that other section, which we will also have to clean up later. So what I proposed here is a number of changes that move some of those standards into the PD, but only to the degree they're actually accomplishable during the PD process. And there's other language changes that deal with effectively who makes the approval or the determination that things are adequate to meet the scientific standard, and also exactly what the process is. And I have also got a couple of changes to suggest based on, I noticed some typos in here, and some things that were a little unclear. For instance, on page 78, the first underlined paragraph, this was something that the commission had expressed an interest in several months ago, and we were bringing back to you. This keeps coming back on their agenda, and so I keep waiting as they give me more and more data. But one of the things they wanted to do at the time was to restrict the overall height of buildings, even those in the PD process. And it had been suggested that in the past that 5 was the appropriate limit for buildings. However, I pointed out that 5 is what we all hear about as being appropriate throughout the community, and that you would want a little more flexibility when you came to have the PDs, otherwise what's the point in having the PD? And that, in fact, we usually encourage them to go up and floor if they'll make it more narrow so we can preserve more of the view corridor. So if they're trying to, you know, if they, as we talked about with the PD across the street and others around town, they can develop the number of units they want on a shorter, squat building, but they're going to take up every bit of the site. Or they can go higher and leave more space between buildings and more view corridor, and then we can get other things out of them as part of the bartering that goes on with the PD. Things that are in the best interest of the community and are consistent with the comprehensive plan's goals. So this section, what I'm proposing is that they be allowed whatever height is allowed in the district, obvious, that's already in the district. If they want to go higher than that, that the height or the number of floors would be determined as an average of what's surrounding them on the same land uses. So that is a standard or a way of evaluating and allowing for height and other like setbacks and things that you typically would use in a historic district to create a standard within the area as opposed to regulate to an extreme level. For instance, historic districts may require everybody to come up to within 5 feet of the sidewalk with their commercial buildings. However, if the whole district is built 25 feet back, making one building come up to within 5 feet of the sidewalk does not accomplish what you're looking for. It makes it stand out too much. And so a lot of times they'll have an averaging, you know, that you would be allowed to set back to the average of those buildings along the frontage or something of that nature. So you're kind of respecting the character of what's already been designed. That's what I have written in and proposed for that first paragraph dealing with the heights. And I would suggest that the very end of that sentence, which falls off, it says, in furtherance of, that would be the comprehensive plan or comprehensive plan goals for the city or the district. Then, and the next section, the next underlined section, it states that in furtherance of the comprehensive plan policy and in the interest of neighborhood compatibility, PD developments located in blank residential districts are allowed to maximum of 20% of non-parking floor area for commercial uses. We have this standard in the code already for mixed uses that, but what I intended to put there is located in the R3 district. That's really the only one where we allow a mix with commercial. Yeah, sorry about that. You don't want that in R1. And we wouldn't, a PD would be inappropriate in an R1 district anyway, but the R3 does allow a certain amount of commercial, but it requires that it be a percentage of each development, so it forces a mix as opposed to getting those standalone commercial along the beach. And I think this is the point at which we need to start making that clear, because there's been some confusion in the past where it's been suggested that the way our code requires that mix, even though it does require that percentage of a maximum of 20%, that it's not strong enough, and it's allowed people to come in with just a whole commercial activity on a lot based on references to the city code and things of that nature. So I'm going to be suggesting whatever standards are necessary in this code to clean that up and make it clear. It was clearly the intent that we would have mixed developments along the beach area in that R3 district, not that we would have freestanding commercial uses. So that's what I'm attempting to get at here, to clarify. Then I've gone on to specify some changes into exactly what is submitted for a PD. Right now, the site plan requires you to turn in 8 copies, and we don't need 8 copies. This is a small community, and we like to share the plans that we're reviewing, and also need to require electronic versions be submitted at this point. We're getting way too much paper because of the 8 requirement. So, and also then to specify that it includes the records of the neighborhood meeting and any assurances made at that meeting, because that's a little bit unclear in the way the code is currently written. And then I carried over those site plan requirements, but I was very specific in asking them to do things like providing standards for signs instead of an exact plan. For instance, if you don't have your building yet, it's really hard to know where you're going to put the signs. You can put a sign standard together that will regulate the way you're going to put them on the building, but asking for a signage plan is a little bit more detailed than that. The same with the building. We want to know exactly where the building is going to be, and we want to know its impacts, but the exact design of the building is a whole lot of more design and requires us to go almost through a building review before we even get the site plan approved. Now we can specify a standard like a design aesthetic, but again, that should be something that is a set of standards as opposed to an exact design of a building. We need to make sure that the code functions. That is, if we regulate things so specifically that any little tweak or change that has to be made during development requires you to come all the way back through the legislative process for review, then your code is not working. You do not want to constantly be coming back through Planning Commission and then to the Board of Commissioners every time you have to make a slight adjustment to, exactly the angle of an entryway or exactly where the dumpster is. You want to know generally where those are going to be so that we can regulate how you're designing the flow on site and that it's actually going to work. But we have to be careful not to be so specific at this point that there's no room for actually coming back for site plan and building design later. So you'll notice as you go through that instead of asking for building design or more specifics you would typically get later in the site plan, that this asks for standards to be put in place for how you're going to design it. And on page, that looks like 86, is that 86 or 80? 80. Parent 8D, there's a typo there that it should be, instead of approved, it would be approval of FDOT at the very end. And under 9, structural design criteria as required to meet city overlay district requirements applicable to the site. I wanted that to be specified because there are some things listed in the site plan that are only applicable to some places. And people have been insisting that we cannot approve something because it doesn't have design criteria that actually don't even apply to the site. For instance, if you had a PD that was not on the water, you wouldn't need to have all of the site design criteria for your pool the same way as you do if you are on the water. But we've had people complaining that you can't have the PD off the water because we have site criteria dealing with pools for on the water, and you have to include them on. It doesn't make any sense. But we want to be specific that it needs to be applicable to the site itself or the district that it's in.
Okay.
Now, most of the rest of it, I think, is pretty straightforward. I know that the attorney has some things she would like to go over, and I would invite her to jump in at this point.
Sure. Again, for the record, Julia Mandel, and I'm serving as a special land use counsel for the city of Madeira Beach and have been working with Linda on these types of items. I had the opportunity to go through some of these comments and have had an opportunity to look at some of the code provisions. One of the things I think is really important to point out, and I've been doing land use work all over this area for about 20 years, and so I've dealt with PD codes before and in many other jurisdictions, and what I think has happened over time is there's been a conflation in the city of the PD standards for the purposes of entitlement, meaning what can I do on my property versus the standards that are being applied for the point in time that you build that which you've been approved to do. And I think because of those conflated issues, it's caused confusion. And I think it's always important to separate out the entitlement side from the construction side, because for a variety of reasons, it's harder to regulate that which is obligated to be shown to you. How are you going to change that around during the process when they've already completely designed it, or at least to the extent of the design that they're obligated to show, almost to the purpose of being a building permit, commercial site plan review. And so, and that's not abnormal, it's just something that over time you start to realize it really diminishes the whole premise behind a PD, which is to create a flexible zoning classification so that you could do things like maybe have a building go a little bit higher, and it gives the most flexibility to both you as the Planning Commission and also to the Board of Commissioners, where you want to say, well, can you go a little higher here and come down a little here and go. That's the whole premise, the whole purpose behind a PD. Otherwise, everybody's already been entitled by their zoning classification, and you're just kind of stuck with what you get, regardless of whether in the real world on that particular specific site that makes any level of sense. So that's the whole premise and purpose. Plus, it gives staff the opportunity to negotiate and discuss with a particular applicant as to how you manage what your development should look like. So having your standards for your review and also for your submission requirements, which are incredibly important, having them meet up with what your staff needs to be able to actually analyze this appropriately, and then have, when it comes to you, analyzed appropriately, instead of either things that don't apply or things that are not useful at that point in time, really is actually diminishing your process. So I think these types of changes, by kind of taking it out of, okay, this is what we got to look at the end of the process, your site plan review process, versus what we're looking for at this point in the process, not only is extremely important and make sure there's some understanding of what you need to do, I think in the long run gives everybody more flexibility in looking at these things, because you're not looking at something that is almost like so far down the pike in its design that it becomes very difficult to manage. So the way these standards are written out and the way they're put together and the way they dovetail into your review and the proposal, I think helps you get there. And so I've gone through it, and I had a lot of the same comments that Linda's already gone through. I have a couple of small changes, just in 110.388, making it clear that, you know, if the development staff says we need something more, something less, that they have that authority. Because you also don't want to make your standards for submission so hardcore that, you know, somebody can't say, well, no, I need you to show me this, or I need this to be able to analyze this. So I want to make sure there's flexibility in there. In terms of the standards, these are very much in line with what I traditionally see in other codes. So I think you're really kind of coming into line with most PD codes by, again, separating out your entitlement process, your zoning process, which really is what the whole premise of your entitlement process is, from your building, what is it going to look like when it actually gets constructed process. I had a couple questions, but actually Linda has made me, in hearing her presentation, it kind of answered some of my questions. One thing, the only other thing I wanted to really clarify too relates to your neighborhood meeting record. We need to clarify exactly what that is, so that it's It's so that we make sure applicants come into your process knowing what part of that record needs to come in. The only other thing I want to say, and this may be something for consideration, is especially when you're talking about either transcribed or video recorded or orally recorded record, and you don't have a court reporter, they're actually taking it down, which just seems a little onerous. You need to be cognizant of the fact that sometimes those technological things fail, and I have been in hearings where you couldn't go forward because you didn't have that transcript, and it will push you back. Yes. So I just want it to be clear, not that if there's a failure there, what does that mean? And you know, maybe that's something where we take a hard line on and say, if it fails, too bad, start over. Or if it fails because of a technical irregularity, if there's notes or other ways to get there, or if there's a way to have that waived, just want you to know, because once you make it a standard, you've made it a standard and you can't move forward. And since I have actually seen that occur, I just want to bring that up for everybody's consideration. Let me see. The only other thing, I just want to make it very clear for the record that because these are procedural changes, they will apply at the point in time this is approved to all applications which are pending. It's not a move forward on the day you apply because we want to treat people procedurally correctly, so we want to make sure everybody has the benefit of procedural so that there's no confusion on any applications that are currently pending. I can answer any questions you want. I didn't know how much information you were going to need or not need on this particular issue. And as I start to work on more of your land development items, I'll be a little more proficient in some of the processes.
I have a question for you with regard to the record for the city, for the public information meeting. So on paragraph 4, which is on page 82 of our package, paragraph 4 says the record, the applicant shall provide the city both a written and video record. So to your point, are you saying that's in and of itself a bit oppressive?
I'm not saying it's oppressive. I just want everybody to be aware that I have, say somebody comes and does a videotape, and the videotape, or it's not videotapes, gosh, I'm old.
Understood,
You know, they do whatever it is, however they now record these things. If it fails, meaning it's a bad videotape and they don't have it able to be transcribed, I just want everybody to be aware, unless you put in some opportunity to waive that provision in the case of a failure or something like that, everybody's going to need to go back to the beginning, and I only know that because I've actually been involved in those situations.
Okay.
So it's something that I just wanted to raise to you all. If that's the intent, then that's fine, but I just want everybody to be aware that if something fails, something fails.
Is there a way to fix that in our proposal to say or?
I can tell you that that is the intent. Locally, was that if you don't have a record, you have to go back and do it because
I understand
the
that.
commission wants to be able to review the video record in order to ensure that no assurances of any kind were given to the developer that did not show up in the site plan.
Is that why we're doing written and video?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, they usually get them transcribed afterwards.
Okay.
We do notify them in advance that if they are responsible for recording their own meetings, at least one staff member attends, just to make sure that the people had opportunity to get there. But we are not required and do not make any record of it. They have to provide their own record, and if they fail to do so, they have to do it over again. Okay. And we have a history here locally of they're doing their neighborhood meeting over again because something didn't go right.
Yeah.
So I've been involved in other jurisdictions with that, so that's the reason I raise it, is because at the time, that particular city council was like, well, do we really have to have that? We're like, yes, you do. Got to go back. And
Start
so
over, yeah.
it's for everyone and everything. So that's the only reason I pointed out is if that issue comes up, everybody is now committing, and they commit knowingly that if that fails, meaning you better show up with 2 videotapes, you know, or you know, someone two cameras, so someone should have their iPhone out so they can at least get it, you know, videotaped and transcribed. You know, the technology is a little, I guess, different today, but it's just something I've had experience with, so I wanted to make sure that everybody was clear on the record, and there was no question later, did we mean what we said? Yes, we meant what we said, or no, we'd like, you know, if something fails, we'd like the opportunity to say, all right, if you can provide some other kind of record, whether it was somebody taking notes or minutes or or something like
So
that.
we don't provide the applicant with some standardized format for
No.
the record that they're supposed to provide for us, as far as
No,
the
that's
written version of that.
Correct. Now, I have been in other cities where they do, you either provide the video or you have a court reporter present to officially transcribe. That's another option. Either way, it's helpful that they're required to provide some written transcript as well as the video, because otherwise we're required to go through and create a record off of their video. And we don't want that to be the case, but
So
that's
but
an
it's perfectly
option.
clear it's on them to provide the video at this point.
Yeah, right,
And
but both the video and a transcription. So if they, I could see it serving the same purpose if they don't have a video with some sort of transcription, that they need to replace that with an actual court reporter officially transcribed record of the meeting. It's, I don't know, when I got here, that both things were required, and to date, they've all understood that. We've made it a real point that they were required to provide both. Some in the past have actually had court reporters at their meetings and submitted an official transcript.
Do we see this as a tripping point? Is that?
It's not a tripping point, it's really just more, it's that moment where you put it in there and we make sure it's in there, and it's already to a certain extent in there as it is today, but timing-wise it's a little different. But my point is once you say it and it's in there, it's kind of going back to the whole premise of making this whole PD process within the PD code and what it is we want. If you say you have to have it, then you have to have it. And so I just wanted to be clear that you know, that we're asking, not asking, we are putting, and this perfectly legitimate intent, the onus on a person who is seeking to get a PD to go through this process for a neighborhood meeting and on their own, not accepting that the city will take care of it, to videotape something and then provide a transcript of that, and that could fail, and that is something that it would be unwaivable in the way this is drafted.
Yes.
And so I just want that to be very clear so that nobody has any question.
Yeah, I have a question about the neighborhood meeting. It affects people in a 200-foot radius, 200-foot radius. And, but it again says that the owner's meeting should be 2,300 feet from the proposed development?
No, that's the twos marked out in the 300. It went from
Yeah,
2 to 300.
the two-ish
Okay.
across through.
Oh, yeah, that was my question. I had that question. It was kind of confusing. Yeah, I know. I thought it was where he had his meeting. There's a lot going on in this revision, a lot.
It seems like a lot of it is picking up provisions in another section and making it clear it's part of the PD instead of the cross-reference. And at the beginning of my presentation, what I was saying is you have a section devoted to site plan review. Site plan review is intended for the point in time you've already received rights on your property to develop, and now we're fine-tuning it. Right. And so by cross-referencing that into your PD process, you're asking for you to see something fine-tuned before you had a chance to look at it from a little bit of a higher level. And so by picking up the types of provisions and moving that over to the PD process and letting the PD process stand alone, you're making sure you're getting all the stuff you need to review a PD within the same section, so there's no cross-reference. And you're also making sure that the items that you are receiving as part of that PD review process are the types of items you actually need to review it. So that's why it looks like a lot, but really a lot of it is picking up and moving and clarifying more than it is actually writing something new.
And what are we using for our height and density? Are we using our SAP, or are we using?
In terms of density, the land use will always rule. They cannot go over a density that the land use, underlying land use allows. The height I explained up front is something that I suggest that they either be allowed the height that's permitted in that district, or if they're allowed to go higher, it would be, they would max out at an average,
Like what's around.
an average of what's around, or, and that even that would be granted to them only in exchange for changes, additional landscaping, additional setback, additional retail if you wanted, but other things that you could ask in exchange for that. Not that there's any kind of automatic grant of a height addition. They would have to provide something
It's
in
a give and
exchange
take.
for that, yes.
Yeah, it's, give us a, but do they have a limit? I mean, can somebody come in and say?
Yes,
That's what I'm wondering. What are we using as a guideline?
So the allowance of additional floors over the allowed in the underlying zoning would be granted, well, I give you conditions. Since it would be at an average of the density or intensity, it would not be anything higher than what is already in town. Right, well, you know, for instance, the one that's, well, I can't really talk about it because it's quasi-judicial, but if you had a building over there, you know, you would be averaging in the buildings on around it, including the buildings if it's in the similar zoning across from it, and you'd end up with an average of, yeah, it would be lower. Now, most of our bigger buildings here are 7 stories, further down the beach. We have a lot of 7-story buildings. If you were between a 7 and a 5-story building, you'd end up with 6, but you wouldn't be able to get over, you couldn't get to the 7. If you're between 2 7s, then you might be able to get to a 7, but you couldn't get over that. That's usually the case. If you wanted to propose a limit, then you're certainly welcome to do that. But the idea is that it would be blending in with what
Right.
is already allowable use. It gives people the sense that if they go the extra mile, they have the opportunity to kind of meet the standard within whatever district they're locating.
Okay? Like it. All right. Any more questions of staff?
Well,
Yep, no, we have, next step is any public input.
yeah.
Come on, Mr. Preston.
Again, I apologize for not having documents and being able to read it because I couldn't find it. Robert Preston, 425 South Bay Shore. What Ms. Portal is trying to do to clarify these documents that she's talking about makes a lot of sense because, as we all know, sitting here, a couple of years ago, it cost the city a couple $100,000 or more because of the lawsuits involved, because of the way things were written, even though the planning and zoning was trying to do the right thing. So I think what she's doing now is clarifying that, allows a builder, I'm just going by things that I've heard and seen and listened to in the commission meetings, but it allows them to set forth a proposal and say, what do you think about this, and what do you think it for the city, and not have to have final road drainage and final impact as far as sewer and final impact as far as stormwater and stuff like this, because that all would come later. Is that correct? So what that allows is for these people to proceed and allow them to start putting more monies into it, because the basic idea has been approved by you as a commission members, and then the city commissioners as well. So I think what it does is it allows the developer to put some money up front and say, this is what we'd like to do, and if you like it and you approve of it and it meets all these lower level standards, then they can move forward. At this point, they have to have the whole ball of wax before they get approval, and that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, normally people don't do things like that. The other thing is when Mrs. Portal was talking about the height of the building. And I'm going to go back to way back when for just a minute, is when the first proposal of the town center was at 14 stories, something like that, or 12 stories. I was not happy with that, even though I live way over on South Bay Shore. I just thought that was too much. And then I was able to, the whole thing got down lower, and the developer was able to meet with the developer, and he showed me what the new town center would look like. It would have shops, it would have public parking, it would have areas for tables outside so that people could sit. There was more green area and trees and stuff like that. And that really, really looked good to me and presented. I would love for my wife and I to be able to walk up to downtown and go to a 4-star restaurant or shop and kind of like a little Europe type thing even. And I think that would be just absolutely wonderful. Because most of the restaurants here, I mean, they're going to cook the fish the same way. There's nothing special. You know, I would like to see a 4-star restaurant that really serves some nice stuff, and you can sit outside and enjoy a glass of wine or something like that. So even that proposal got knocked way down. And what we have is what Mrs. Portal talked about, was they're still getting the same, basically the same amount of rooms and stuff like that. But now we've taken away the green space. We've taken away the trees. We've taken away the additional public parking, which we are in need of. And I think what Mrs. Portal is proposing is something that is very viable for the city. And I think that I would really like to see that move in that direction. I really like this city, and I would like to be able to come over the bridge and say, wow, this is the most beautiful place we have in this, in the beaches. I mean, this is the place to want to be. And I like tourists. I mean, I love watching people. I know it's a pain in the butt for traffic at times, but people are entertaining as heck. So I would really support what Mrs. Portal is doing here. I think it's a very positive move in the right direction. And by doing so, you may limit some lawsuits against the city in the future, which is, I mean, I wouldn't have to work for effort. The money you give away on lawsuits. So anyway, thank you for your time, and I hope you consider what Mrs. Portal is doing, because I think it will benefit the city a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? All right. We'll close the public comments at this time. Planning Commission, any other questions for staff or discussions?
I have a couple of comments. I agree. It's more like we have a feasibility study before people sink a lot of money. We need that. We don't need to be having people come in here and be disappointed because they spend all this money and then they find out, well, there's certain criteria that would never have been met, so let's do this. I got a couple of small things. One is about the 200 feet, 300 feet. If I look at page 81, it says we're going from 2 to 300 feet, page 82 says 200 feet at the top, second line. Do we mean to
Right.
change that to 300 as well?
Yes,
Okay, let me.
thank you.
Okay, and when we do this change, we have other documents like ordinance 2-78, page 2, it shows 200 feet. Ordinance 86-144, page 10 says 200 feet. I guess we'll go to change those as well, right?
Yes, we'll make sure that everything within this ordinance has the
We'll
300
get this one
in
right,
it.
and then we'll go to the
Right.
others, right?
Yeah, there are other, yeah,
Because a lot of this, one relays on the other, but we gotta make sure at some time we know that if we make this change,
Right.
if we issue documents based on the others, people will be confused, because it says 200 there as well.
right, yes.
Okay,
There are
so
other
we'll all
portions
be
of the
on the
code
lookout for
that,
that, right?
that's right.
Okay.
Good catch.
I'm done. I know it seems hard to believe.
No, you did a fine job, thank you.
I'm done.
All right, anyone else have anything? We have a motion to approve or deny. The approval would be along with the couple of changes, housekeeping issues. Just for clarity, on page 78, at the end of the underlined paragraph, we would be adding after the in furtherance of the comprehensive plan policy. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes,
And then further down that page, section 110-387, under uses permitted, at the end of the underlined line where it says PD developments located in R3 residential districts.
correct.
Would be the correction there. And then we would be making a clarification on page 82 at the top to make that 300 feet, to match the 300 feet as found on the bottom of page 81. Correct?
Correct. I think that there was, yes, and on page 80, there were a couple of changes referring to the approval of FDOT instead of approved. That's mainly housekeeping. But then at the end of the first line, underlined, structural design criteria as required to meet city overlay district requirements appropriate to the site.
Appropriate to the site
Yes.
Earlier you said applicable.
Applicable.
or applicable?
Oh, I'm sorry, applicable, I did, and you're correct.
Okay.
That's the one I missed. Thank you. Okay, any other?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we accept TCH 2019.0-07 as changed according to what we just went over.
Okay. Everyone clear on what the motion is at this point? Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Very good. We have a motion and a second to approve TCH 2019-07. Please call the vote.
Commissioner Pryor,
Yes.
Commissioner Clyett, Commissioner Hearn,
Yes.
Commissioner Rappa,
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Wyckoff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. Moving on to old business. I see none before us. Any planning commission discussion?
There were just, I wanted to let you know that we are gradually trying to go to a less paper-filled existence for us all, and so want to give you your agendas and your packets on your iPad. We even have one for Plan Commissioner Pryor here tonight to get him started. And if at some reason you do need a paper version, we would be going back to back. So you can let us know if you need one, but we're going to try to scrunch down the paper use considerably.
Okay, and we'll be moving then the item we skipped tonight, we'll be moving that to our next,
Right,
potentially to our
right.
next
That was
meeting.
continued to the next meeting, yes.
Okay. And our next meeting is scheduled for May the 13th at 6 p.m. Yes, ma'am?
And there's one more thing I wanted to remind you all, that a lot of what comes through here is quasi-judicial and may come back, you never know. And case in point, both of the PDs will be coming back to you, so do not, involve yourself in ex parte communication on those. Also, we have an information request, public information request for all communication, including communication by planning commission members on certain items. I will forward that to you. If you happen to have things on your emails or anything that relate to those items, then forward them back to us and we'll get them on as part of the public information request. But I'll get that out to you tomorrow so you know what to be looking for. For the most part, I don't think you probably do, but there, you know, if you did have anything at all, and it's most recent too, so I don't think it'll affect you, but if you do have anything, get it back to us so that we're sure we meet the complete public information request.
Okay,
All right.
very good. Thank you. This meeting's adjourned.